The Interstellar Defense Summit of 2487 was supposed to be Admiral Kira Patel's chance to prove humanity belonged among the stars. Instead, she found herself trying to explain to a furious Arcanian commander why his prized war machine would make an excellent racing vehicle. With all due respect, Commander Vex, Kira said, maintaining eye contact with all four of the aliens' bioluminescent eyes, your Mark 7 Devastator has the most impressive power-to-weight ratio I've seen in 20 years of engineering. She gestured at the towering black machine behind him, its crystalline armor gleaming under the exhibition hall's lights. It's practically begging to break acceleration records. Commander Vex's scaled skin shifted from its usual deep blue to an agitated purple. The Mark 7 is the pinnacle of Zarkanian military technology, Admiral Patel. It is designed to maintain peace through superior firepower, not to participate in your species' peculiar entertainment. Around them, representatives from 30 different spacefaring civilizations watched the exchange with varying degrees of interest. The annual summit was meant to showcase defensive capabilities and forge military alliances. No one had ever suggested turning it into a sporting event. Until now. Kira walked around the Mark 7, her augmented eyes scanning its specifications. Look at these thrust vectoring systems, the neural interface response time, the adaptive suspension. She whistled appreciatively. Commander, you've built the perfect racing machine and didn't even realize it. That is because it is not a racing machine. Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. It is a deterrent against galactic aggression. And what better way to deter aggression than by challenging potential adversaries to beat you on a racetrack instead of a battlefield? Kira's dark eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Think about it. Same engineering, same skill, same drive to win, but without the casualties. A murmur of interest rippled through the watching crowd. Several Andromean delegates, their crystalline forms shimmering with curiosity, moved closer to hear better. Even the normally aloof Nexus Collective representatives seemed intrigued, their hovering data clusters pulsing with increased frequency. This is absurd, Vex muttered, but Kira noticed his color had shifted slightly toward contemplative green. The Mark 7 systems are classified military technology. So are ours, Kira replied, gesturing toward the sleeker silver machine in the human section. The Thunder Arrow there uses the same targeting computers as our orbital defense platforms, but instead of calculating weapon trajectories, we've reprogrammed them for optimal racing lines. Your species has a disturbing habit of turning everything into a competition, Vex observed. Exactly, Kira grinned, and look how well it's worked out for us. Every time we've turned swords into plowshares, or in this case, war mechs into race cars, we've made technological leaps that benefited everyone. The watching delegates had begun to cluster into small groups, engaged in animated discussion. The Centaurian ambassador, her feathers ruffling with excitement, was already taking bets on potential race outcomes. Vex's second-in-command, Lieutenant Rax, leaned in to whisper something in their native tongue. The commander's color shifted again, this time to a thoughtful blue-green. And how exactly would this race be conducted? Vex asked carefully. Kira fought to keep her expression neutral despite her internal celebration. Simple. We set up a course using the summit's testing grounds. Each team gets 2 weeks to modify their mechs for racing specifications. No weapons, just pure performance. We race, we learn from each other's engineering approaches, and we show the galaxy that competition doesn't always have to end in conflict. 2 weeks is not sufficient time to properly optimize. Vex began. Afraid you can't be our time. Kira interrupted, knowing she was pushing her luck but unable to resist. The commander's scales flushed with competitive purple. The Mark 7 could outperform your Thunder Arrow with its auxiliary power systems disabled. Care to prove it? Kira extended her hand, a gesture she knew the Zarkanians had studied since first contact. Commander Vex, I formally challenge you to the first-ever Galactic Mech Racing Championship. The exhibition hall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes, optical sensors, and various alien sensory organs focused on Vex. The commander looked at Kira's offered hand, then at the Mark 7, then at the increasingly excited crowd of delegates. If, he said slowly, and I emphasize if, we were to participate in such an event, it would be solely to demonstrate the superior engineering capabilities of the Zarkanian Empire. Of course, Kira agreed solemnly, struggling to keep a straight face, and any modifications to the Mark 7 would be conducted under strict security protocols. Naturally, and there would need to be comprehensive rules and safety regulations in place. We can draft them together. Vex stared at her extended hand for another long moment. Then, to the astonishment of his entire delegation, he reached out and grasped it with his scaled fingers. Very well, Admiral Patel, we accept your challenge. The exhibition hall erupted in cheers and excited chatter. Representatives from other species were already crowding forward, asking about entry requirements and technical specifications. In the midst of the chaos, Kira caught Vex's eye and saw a flicker of amused resignation in his expression. I hope you realize, he said quietly, that you have just completely disrupted centuries of military tradition. Kira's grin widened. Commander, I believe we've just started a revolution. The next 2 weeks at the Interstellar Defense Summit became an unprecedented fusion of military precision and racing fever. The massive exhibition halls, originally designed to showcase weapons of war, had transformed into makeshift racing garages where species that once eyed each other with suspicion now traded engineering tips and performance metrics. Lieutenant Rax found Admiral Kira Patel beneath the Thunder Arrow's open chest plate, her dark hair tied back and arms deep in hydraulic systems. Admiral, I require your expertise, they said, their scales shifting to an embarrassed orange. We are experiencing difficulties with the Mark 7's balance compensators. Kira slid out from under her mech, wiping grease from her hands. Having trouble with the turns. She'd been expecting this. The Mark 7's impressive height gave it battlefield advantages, but would make it top-heavy on a racing circuit. Commander Vex insists it is a minor calibration issue, Rax said, lowering their voice. But we have already destroyed 3 practice barriers and a support column. A crash from across the hall punctuated their words, followed by distinctly Zarkanian cursing. Kira bit back a smile. Let me guess, he's trying to maintain the original military-grade stabilization protocols. The commander believes any significant deviation from military specifications would be dishonorable. Right, Kira sighed. Tell him I'm coming over to discuss interspecies safety regulations. She grabbed her toolkit and followed Rax to the Zarkanian Bay, where the Mark 7 stood amidst scattered debris. Commander Vex was berating a team of engineers, his scales cycling through various shades of frustration. Commander, Kira called out, I couldn't help but notice you're redecorating the hall. Vex's scales settled into an irritated purple. These practice obstacles are poorly constructed. The barriers are rated to withstand orbital bombardment, Kira pointed out. Maybe we should talk about your approach to turning. She activated her augmented vision, scanning the Mark 7's modified frame. You're still running military-grade gyroscopic stabilizers, aren't you? They are the finest in the galaxy. For keeping a war machine upright while firing plasma cannons, sure. But racing requires a different kind of stability. Kira projected a holographic simulation from her palm. Look, in combat, you want to maintain a fixed center of gravity. But in racing, you need to shift that center dynamically through the turns. Like this. She manipulated the hologram, showing how the Thunder Arrow's frame flexed and adjusted through high-speed maneuvers. Several Zarkanian engineers leaned forward, their professional curiosity overcoming their military reserve. Impossible, Vex declared. The structural integrity will actually improve, Kira interrupted. Here, let me show you something we learned from studying Centaurian avian mechanics. Over the next few hours, the bay turned into an impromptu engineering workshop. Other species' technical teams drifted over, drawn by the unusual sight of humans and Zarkanians working together. The Andromians offered insights about crystalline lattice distribution for better shock absorption. A Nexus collective analyst suggested optimization algorithms for the neural interface's response time. Fascinating, an ethereal observer whispered, its translucent form rippling with interest. They are achieving more innovation through cooperation than centuries of military competition produced. As the day progressed, more teams began bringing their own mechs and technical challenges to the impromptu gathering. The Centaurians struggled with heat dissipation in their lightweight frames. The Nexus Collective's drone-controlled units needed help processing organic pilot instincts. Each problem became a group exercise in creative problem-solving. I never thought I'd see a Zarkanian war machine on hydraulic lifts, Rax marveled, watching their pride and joy being methodically transformed. Just wait until we add the racing stripes. Kira joked, then quickly added, "That was a joke, Commander," as Vex's scales flashed alarm red. But even Vex couldn't deny the improvements. The Mark 7's test runs became smoother, its turning radius tightened, and its response time shortened. The destroyed barriers were replaced with proper safety barriers, designed through collaboration between multiple species engineering teams. Word spread throughout the summit. Delegates who came to watch the preparations often found themselves drafted into impromptu engineering teams. The Ethereal Observer Council, traditionally neutral in all matters, requested permission to document the proceedings as an unprecedented example of technological convergence. Late one night, as the engineering teams were wrapping up another marathon session, Kira found Vex studying performance data from the day's test runs. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. "No," Vex replied, his scales showing a complex pattern she'd never seen before. "I am having what your species calls a paradigm shift." He gestured at the data. "We have achieved more tactical mobility improvements in 2 weeks of racing preparations than in the last 5 years of military development. Amazing what happens when you let people play with their toys instead of pointing them at each other," Kira said. "That is a gross oversimplification of complex geopolitical." Vex paused, noting her grin. "Ah, you are engaging in human humor again. Speaking of which, have you reconsidered the racing stripes?" "Admiral Patel, I am willing to repurpose a war machine for recreational purposes. I will optimize its systems for non-combat performance. I will even, against my better judgment, allow the installation of what you call the boost button. But I draw the line at decorative embellishments." "Fair enough," Kira conceded, "but you might want to tell that to your engineering team." She pointed across the bay, where several junior Zarkanian engineers were surreptitiously testing holographic paint patterns on a maintenance drone. Vex's scales cycled through several colors before settling on a resigned blue-green. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "a small imperial crest would be acceptable." "For morale purposes." "Of course," Kira agreed solemnly. "Purely for morale." As she headed back to her own bay, Kira passed dozens of teams still hard at work. The exhibition hall hummed with the sound of tools, the glow of welding torches, and the excited chatter of beings from across the galaxy, all united in the pursuit of making their machines go faster. The first Galactic Mech Racing Championship was 2 days away, but Kira already knew they'd achieved something far more significant than any race result could measure. They'd turned weapons into wonders, and in doing so, might have just changed the face of interstellar relations forever. Though she still really wanted to see those racing stripes on the Mark 7. Race day arrived with an energy that transformed the summit's testing grounds into something between a military parade and a carnival. Temporary stands erected around the course were packed with delegates from every known spacefaring civilization. The track itself was a masterpiece of cross-species engineering, a 3-dimensional circuit that wound through the ground's various terrains, incorporating zero-gravity sections, magnetic acceleration zones, and passages through artificially generated atmospheric conditions. In the pilot's prep area, Admiral Kira Patel was conducting final checks on her neural interface when First Delegate Nix of the Nexus Collective approached, their holographic form flickering with analytical patterns. Our probability matrices suggest an 82.4% likelihood of significant cultural impact from today's events. Nix communicated directly into Kira's mind, though we cannot determine whether that impact will be positive or negative. That's what makes it exciting, Kira replied, adjusting her racing suit's environmental controls. Sometimes you have to roll the dice to make history. Dice. Your species' practice of using random number generation for entertainment. An apt metaphor. The prep area was a showcase of galactic diversity. The Centaurian pilot, Wing Commander Zara, performed elaborate pre-flight movements that made her feathers shimmer like liquid metal. The Andronian team had partially crystallized their pilot for better resonance with their mech's crystalline structure. Even the ethereal observers had entered a contestant, their pilot existing as pure energy within a containment suit. Commander Vex approached, his scales showing pre-race tension in rapid color shifts. Admiral Patel, I trust you are prepared to witness the superiority of Zarkanian engineering. Absolutely, Kira grinned. From behind, as we take the lead. Before Vex could respond, the announcement system activated. All pilots to their mechs. Race commencement in 15 minutes. The atmosphere shifted from nervous excitement to focused intensity. Pilots headed to their machines, each accompanied by their technical teams for final adjustments. The Thunder Arrow's cockpit welcomed Kira with familiar warmth as neural interfaces connected and systems came online. Pilots, this is race control. A multilingual transmission echoed through all mechs. Proceed to starting positions. Remember, this is a non-combat event. Any weapons discharge, intentional or accidental, will result in immediate disqualification. 8 mechs moved to the starting grid, each a unique fusion of military precision and racing modifications. The Mark 7 towered over most competitors, its imperial crest gleaming under the artificial sunlight. The Centaurian entry looked more like a mechanical bird of prey, while the Nexus Collective's drone-controlled unit seemed to shift shape subtly as it moved. 3 minutes to start. Final systems check. Kira ran through her checklist, feeling Thunder Arrow respond like an extension of her own body. Around the track, hundreds of sensor drones activated, ready to broadcast every moment to audiences across the galaxy. 1 minute. Power systems to race mode. The whine of various propulsion systems filled the air. The Mark 7's crystalline armor vibrated with contained energy. The ethereal mech began to glow. 30 seconds. Neural interfaces to maximum sensitivity. Kira's world expanded as she merged more deeply with Thunder Arrow systems. She could feel every circuit, every hydraulic pulse, every quantum fluctuation in the power core. 10 seconds. Defense field generators activated. Energy fields shimmered into existence around the track, protecting spectators from any potential accidents. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A pulse of energy swept across the starting grid. Race stared. 8 mechs launched forward with enough combined force to register on seismic sensors. The Thunder Arrow's acceleration pressed Kira back into her seat despite the inertial dampeners. The Mark 7 kept pace beside her, its massive frame moving with surprising grace. The Centaurian entry shot upward, using the vertical space, while the Nexus drone took an impossibly tight line through the first turn. They hit the first technical section, a series of sharp turns through varying gravitational fields. The Thunder Arrow's modified stabilizers proved their worth as Kira threaded through the course. The Mark 7 struggled slightly with the directional changes, but made up for it with raw power on the straightaways. Impressive adaptation of the stabilization systems. Vex's voice came through the race channel as they entered a zero-gravity section neck and neck. "You're not so bad yourself," Kira replied, watching the Mark 7 execute a perfect rotation. "Those crystal matrix adjustments are working well." Their conversation cut off as they entered the atmospheric challenge zone. Each section simulated different planetary conditions, from the crushing gravity of gas giants to the thin atmosphere of terraformed colonies. The ethereal mech excelled here, its energy-based structure adapting instantly to each change. Halfway through the race, the leaderboard kept shifting. The Centaurian entry's agility gave it an edge in technical sections. The Nexus drone's predictive algorithms shaved milliseconds off each turn. The Mark 7's raw power dominated the straightaways. Thunder Arrow maintained position through consistent performance across all conditions. As they entered the final lap, 4 mechs broke away from the pack: Thunder Arrow, the Mark 7, the Centaurian entry, and the ethereal Mechs. The crowd's excitement was palpable even through the cockpit's shielding. The final section combined all previous challenges: varying gravity, atmospheric conditions, and technical demands. Kira felt Thunder Arrow's systems reach peak synchronization as they entered the last series of turns. The Mark 7 pulled alongside, its crystalline armor refracting light in brilliant patterns. The finish line approached. The Centaurian entry dove from above, while the ethereal mech phased through what seemed like solid matter to find a shorter line. 4 machines, representatives of vastly different civilizations, pushed the boundaries of their engineering and piloting skills in perfect harmony. They crossed the finish line so closely that quantum sensors were needed to determine the order. Thunder Arrow first by a margin so small it could only be measured in Planck lengths, the Mark 7 second, the ethereal Mechs third, and the Centaurian entry fourth. As the mechs powered down, the crowds erupted in celebration, not just for the winners, but for every participant, every engineer, every species that had come together to make this moment possible. In the aftermath, as pilots emerged from their cockpits, the usual military protocols and diplomatic formalities fell away. Commander Vex's scales showed not disappointment but pride as he congratulated Kira. The Centaurian pilot shared flight techniques with the ethereal team. The Nexus Collective's analysts were already proposing modifications for the next race. Next race? Vex asked, overhearing this discussion. This was meant to be a one-time demonstration. Kira looked at the excited crowds, the celebrating teams, and the mechs that had just written a new chapter in galactic history. Commander, I have a feeling we've started something that's going to be very hard to stop. Looking at his own engineers already discussing improvements with their counterparts from other species, Vex's scales shifted to a color of acceptance. Perhaps, he admitted, that is not entirely undesirable. 6 months after the first race, the Galactic Mech Racing Championship had evolved from a one-off event into a phenomenon that was reshaping interstellar relations. The summit's temporary racing facilities have been replaced by a permanent circuit complex, funded by a coalition of species that previously wouldn't even share star charts with each other. Admiral Kira Patel stood in the new race control center, watching holographic displays track practice sessions for the upcoming Grand Prix. The Thunder Arrow was now just one of 36 entries from 22 different species. Each race brought new innovations, new alliances, and occasionally new diplomatic challenges. Admiral, we have a situation. Lieutenant Rax announced, their scales showing concerned yellow patterns. The Proximan Confederation is threatening to withdraw from tomorrow's race. Kira suppressed a groan. The Proximans, one of the newest entries to the championship, were notorious for their paranoia about technological espionage. What's the issue this time? They're accusing the Nexus Collective of using quantum scanning to steal their propulsion designs. That's ridiculous. First Delegate Nix manifested beside them, their holographic form radiating indignation. Our quantum scanners are purely for safety monitoring, as agreed in the racing protocols. Tell that to the Proximan ambassador, Rax said. She's demanding we ban all quantum scanning technology from the circuit. Kira checked the time. The qualification rounds were scheduled to start in 3 hours. Where's Commander Vex? We need to handle this through proper channels. The commander is currently mediating a dispute between the Centaurian and Andromean teams regarding crystalline resonance frequencies in the high-speed sections, Rax reported. Of course he is. Kira muttered. The championship's success had gradually transformed Vex from a reluctant participant into its most ardent defender of fair competition. His military background made him surprisingly effective at resolving technical disputes between species. The control center's main display lit up with new alerts. The ethereal observers were reporting unusual energy signatures from the proximate pit area. The Centaurian team had filed a formal protest about crystal harmonics. 3 different species were requesting clarification on the definition of standard gravitational conditions for the qualifying session. Remember when we just wanted to make war machines go fast? Kira asked no one in particular. Your initial proposition has evolved beyond its original parameters, Mechs observed. The championship has become a catalyst for technological and diplomatic exchange. That was an understatement. The racing series had created opportunities for cooperation that centuries of traditional diplomacy have failed to achieve. Species shared technical knowledge, not for military advantage, but for the pure joy of competition. Engineers who once designed weapons now collaborated on safety systems and performance improvements. But success brought its own challenges. More participants meant more conflicts to resolve. Higher stakes meant greater temptation to bend rules. The simple spirit of that first race was in danger of being lost in a web of political maneuvering and technical regulations. Right, Kira decided. Let's handle this the old-fashioned way. Call an emergency meeting of all team principals in the main conference room. And get Commander Vex there as soon as he's done with the crystal dispute. An hour later, representatives from every racing team sat around a massive holographic table. The Proximan ambassador's environmental suit pulsed with agitation as she repeated her accusations against the Nexus Collective. Other species delegates added their own concerns about technology sharing and competitive fairness. Commander Vex arrived just as the discussion threatened to descend into chaos. His scales showed the calm blue of someone who had learned to find order in chaos. If I may, he interrupted the growing argument. I believe we are forgetting something fundamental. He activated the room's main display, showing footage from that first race 6 months ago. We began this championship not to prove superiority, but to demonstrate how competition could unite us. The room fell silent as they watched the historic first finish. Kira noticed how many of the delegates leaned forward, caught up in the moment, despite having seen it many times before. The Proximan Confederation fears their technology will be copied, Vex continued. The Nexus Collective worries their monitoring systems will be restricted. The Centaurians and Andromeans debate crystal harmonics, but look at what we have built together. The display shifted to show the current championship standings, the technical innovations each team had contributed, the safety improvements they'd developed collectively. Every species here has shared something valuable, Kira added, following Vex's lead. Not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to be part of something greater than themselves. You're suggesting we simply ignore potential espionage? The Proximan ambassador demanded. I'm suggesting we remember why we're here, Kira replied. Yes, we need rules and monitoring to ensure fair competition. But if we let fear and suspicion dominate, we're no better than when these machines were built for war. First Delegate Nix's holographic form brightened with sudden understanding. Perhaps we have been approaching this incorrectly. Instead of restricting technology sharing, we should be formalizing it. What do you mean? Several delegates asked simultaneously. Each race could feature a technical exchange symposium, Nix proposed. Teams share one innovation they're proud of, under controlled conditions. We turn technology transfer from a fear into a feature. The suggestion sparked intense discussion around the table. The Proximan ambassador's suit colors shifted from aggressive red to thoughtful purple. Other delegates began offering refinements to the idea. We could establish a shared patent pool, the Andromean representative suggested. Innovations developed for racing would benefit all participants. And create a technical advisory board with representatives from all species, added the Centaurian team principal. Kira exchanged glances with Vex, whose scales showed satisfied green. They'd turned a crisis into an opportunity for greater cooperation. exactly what the championship was meant to achieve. All in favor? Vex asked formally. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, new protocols were drafted, the Proximan team withdrew their protest, and qualification sessions proceeded as scheduled. The race weekend became a celebration not just of speed and skill, but of shared innovation and trust. 1 year after the first impromptu race, the Galactic Mech Racing Championship had become the most watched sporting event in known space. The final race of the season brought together not just competitors and fans, but delegates from worlds that had previously shown no interest in interstellar affairs. The paddock area hummed with activity as Admiral Kira Patel completed her pre-race inspection of the heavily modified Thunder Arrow. The machine barely resembled its military origins anymore, having evolved through countless iterations of collaborative engineering. Beside it stood the Mark 7, similarly transformed, its crystalline armor now incorporating designs from 6 different species. "Remarkable," Commander Vex said, approaching with his scales showing contemplative blue. "Do you remember when I insisted this was an insult to military tradition?" "To be fair," Kira replied, "I never expected it to go this far either." Around them, the evidence of their success was overwhelming. The Proximan team now openly shared technical data with the Nexus Collective. Centaurian crystal harmonics experts consulted with Andromean engineers. Even the typically isolationist ethereal observers had established a permanent racing division. Admiral, first delegate Nyx materialized nearby, their holographic form unusually excited. "We've received applications for next season's championship from 3 previously uncontacted civilizations. They made first contact specifically to participate." "You're kidding," Kira said, but Nex's quantum matrices pulsed with certainty. "It appears," Vex observed, "that the desire to race is a universal constant." The championship had grown beyond just racing. Each race weekend now featured technology exchanges, cultural celebrations, and diplomatic forums. Species that once viewed each other with suspicion now collaborated on everything from engine design to environmental protection. 5 minutes to race start, the announcement echoed through the complex. All pilots to their machines. As Kira climbed into Thunder Arrow's cockpit, she reflected on how far they'd come. The neural interface connected smoothly, linking her consciousness with systems that represented the best of multiple civilizations' technologies. "Good luck, Admiral," Vex's voice came through the comm. "Though I suspect today, we all win regardless of the outcome." The starting grid was a testament to galactic cooperation. 48 mechs, each representing different worlds and species, stood ready to compete. But more importantly, they represented 48 teams of engineers, scientists, and dreamers who had learned to work together. Race start in 3, 2, 1. As the mechs launched forward, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced since that first race. Pure joy. Not just at the competition, but at what it represented. They had turned machines of war into bridges between worlds. The race itself was spectacular. The season's accumulated innovations led to performances that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Mechs danced through gravitational fields, their movements choreographed by pilots working in perfect harmony with their machines. But the real victory wasn't measured in lap times or finishing positions. It was in the stands, where beings from across the galaxy cheered together. It was in the pit lanes, where technology and knowledge flowed freely between former rivals. It was in the thousands of new connections formed between species that might never have met without this common passion. After the checkered flight fell, Thunder Arrow finished third, behind a brilliant performance from the Proximan team and a surprising surge from a new Centaurian design. The celebrations began. But they weren't just celebrating the race results. At the official ceremony, representatives from the Galactic Council made a historic announcement. The principles developed by the racing championship would be adopted as a framework for broader technological and cultural exchange throughout known space. In 1 year, the council spokesperson declared, "This championship has achieved more for interstellar cooperation than centuries of traditional diplomacy. It has shown us that competition need not lead to conflict, that diversity breeds innovation, and that the greatest victories are those we achieve together. Commander Vex found Kira at the celebration later, his scales showing a complex pattern she'd never seen before. "Admiral Patel," he said formally, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "When you first suggested racing our war machines, I thought it was a frivolous human notion. I failed to see that you were actually proposing a revolution in interstellar relations." Kira smiled. "To be honest, I just really wanted to see how fast that Mark 7 could go." "Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all," Vex mused, his scales shifting to philosophical green. "Sometimes the simplest desires, to run faster, to fly higher, to push boundaries, can lead to profound changes." Around them, the celebration continued. Engineers from dozens of worlds shared stories and ideas. Pilots exchanged techniques and experiences. Representatives from the newly contacted civilizations eagerly discussed their plans for next season's entries. The ethereal observers had documented everything, creating a comprehensive record of how a suggestion to race war machines had transformed into a movement that was reshaping galactic society. Their final report included a conclusion that would be quoted for generations. In their desire to compete, they learned to cooperate. In their quest for victory, they discovered unity. And in transforming machines of war into instruments of joy, they revealed the true power of innovation, not to destroy, but to bring worlds together in the pursuit of excellence. The next season would bring new challenges, new innovations, and new opportunities for cooperation. But they had already achieved something remarkable. They had proven that even in a galaxy of infinite diversity, the desire to push boundaries and achieve greatness could unite all species. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of racing engines echoed through space, calling out to any civilization ready to join the greatest show in the galaxy. The end.